welcome everyone. For those who may not know me, my name is Sam Barker and I'm the Director at ISCRR, which is the Institute for Safety, Compensation and Recovery Research. Firstly, I just wish to acknowledge the people of the Kulin Nations on whose land we meet today, and I pay my respects to their elders, past, present and emerging. And of course, we extend that respect to First Nations peoples here with us today. So for some of you may not know too much about ISCRR, so we're a partnership between Monash University and WorkSafe Victoria. And over the past 13 years, in fact, I think it was actually our birthday last week, over the past 13 years, we've had the pleasure of delivering research and working with world-leading academics from around the globe in the field of workplace health and safety. We conduct a range of user-driven research, predominantly rapid research activities, including evaluations, global scans, which have quite a bit of qualitative work and evidence reviews. And we're currently conducting some longer-term research of health-based interventions as well. In addition to that work, we also facilitate and broker research that's led by other academics, both at Monash universities and other universities around Australia. And our translation team focuses on the dissemination and uptake of research findings to optimise the impact of the work we do and increase knowledge. And for those of you who are new to our learning series, this is our third one, and each month we present a topic on findings from our latest research, also on the impact from our research and best practice management of research. So as you know, today's learning series session is focused on research impact and its success, and that's presented by Dr. Jimmy Twin, who looks after our research, communication and translation area. Now, Jimmy's been with ISCRR for nearly 5 years, and as I mentioned, he leads the Institute's research, translation and research impact activities. He's got more than 21 years experience in communications and research, and he's authored over 50 peer-reviewed scientific publications and conference proceedings. He's recently been appointed an adjunct research fellow for the School of Public Health and Preventative Medicine. So, Jimmy, over to you.
Now, for my talk today in this ISCRR Learning Series, I'm going to take you all on a bit of a journey about how we translate research here at ISCRR and how we achieve impact from our research translation program. So in today's session, I am hoping you walk away with 3 key learnings. You'll learn a bit more about ISCRR's approach to research impact. You'll learn more about what the key features of a research impact goal. And also, we wish to share with you some of the success factors we've had at ISCRR in achieving research impact. So to start things off, let's ask a question for everyone to put into the chat room. Why do we do research? And for those of you who fund research, why do you fund research? And for those of you who use research, why is research important? There's no right or wrong answers here. So feel free to just put in the chat box what your first thoughts, what first comes into your mind when you think about why we do research. Yes, we've got some great suggestions coming through. We've got to problem solve, best practice, to learn, to gather information, curiosity, most definitely. So I put in my slide, trying to preempt some of these answers to make a difference. And that's certainly the blue skies outcome of all research. And we wish to build knowledge. Yeah, so improve outcomes and to form best practice. To answer questions. All research has a fundamental hypothesis at the beginning, what they wish to address through the research. To make the world a better place, that we all wish our research to have an impact. And also we may have questions that we may wish to question how we think about why we think something is a fact or the truth at the moment, and research will then find out new knowledge about that area. So I'm hoping you all have in your minds now a bit more of your brain's a bit more tuned into impact thinking. One thing that we need to do now, and a lot of these goals are coming through are very aspirational, is to think, how can we bridge that gap between the research that we carry out and finding out how we can make the world a better place, how we can inform and support best practice, how can we improve outcomes for our clients. And we refer to this process as research translation. Now, I'm not going to spend too long on this, as the definition can get rather murky quite quickly the more you delve into it. But for the purposes of this learning session today, I wish you just to think about research translation as very much a non-linear system, but it's a process of moving ideas from the researcher to the research user. And to put it even more simply, you're just bridging that gap between the research knowledge that's created and its potential application. Of course, communication is key, but it's not just about communication. Over on the right-hand side of the current slide, you'll see that there's several examples of research translation activities. They can vary from simply setting an agenda and enforcing guidelines, collaborating to ensure that research findings are used, ensuring that changes in practice and policy are evidence-based, planning and evaluating how the research is going to be used. And it can even involve further research to show the effectiveness of research findings. For example, carrying out an evidence review on meta-analyses. Research translation can occur for all types of research. Today, we're talking more about translational research, as that is ISCRR's specialty, but these learnings can be applied to all levels of research. And also, if you haven't heard of the term research translation, there is a fair chance you may have heard of some of the other terms that have been used interchangeably, such as knowledge translation, knowledge transfer, research utilization, knowledge exchange, research uptake, the list goes on. So what we want to achieve in research translation, the goals that we set, we call research impact goals. So what is research impact? I rather like the definition from the NHMRC, who defines research impact as the verifiable outcomes that research makes to knowledge, health, the economy, and or society, and not the prospective or anticipated effects of the research. And to put these simply, it's really those first three words that you should walk away with today, the verifiable outcomes. So what you actually have evidence for and what you can measure. In an attempt to put this simply, I'm going to pose a rather unique acronym that I came up with. I feel that when you're memorizing or learning something new, analogies are always helpful, for me anyway. So what are the key features of a research impact goal? So think about research impact as you farming for success. And using that FARM acronym, think first about if your research impact goal is feasible. Is it realistic? Is that impact goal achievable? And do the findings directly relate to the impact goal? And to keep with this farming analogy, let's say that you've planted an apple seed. How do you know you have successfully planted that seed? Do you plant a seed and expect apples? Or do you plant that seed and expect a seedling to grow? You're looking at the most direct consequence, and that's your first impact goal. Certainly, there could be longer term impacts with apples, but that may be more far reaching and blue skies. And it doesn't address what the original aim of the research, in this case, planting an apple seed, that to find if that was successful, you'd be seeing what the impact goals are more immediate or more shorter term initially, but certainly you may wish to set up a process to then record how many apples grow in the future. The next part of this acronym is like to ask whether your research impact goal is accessible. Can you get a measure for it? And to ask yourself the question, how can you tell if research impact has occurred? And also, how will you receive this data? This is one area that can fall apart quite quickly with regards to research impact. The first one, talking about feasibility, is whether you're being overambitious with your research impact goals or it's something that's essentially unattainable. But this will bring it back to how you're going to be collecting that data and really what type of measure you need to be collecting. The type of measure could be qualitative, it could be quantitative, it may require a whole new research project or evaluation to determine that every research impact goal is different in that regard. And finally, to finish off the farming acronym, you ask yourself whether your impact goal is ready to measure. And if not, when is the best time? And finding out the when is critical when it comes to research impact monitoring. And you may not know the answer, but it's important to be able to set up the process to be able to connect with the right people and find out who you need to be contacting to get that information in place. And perhaps there is a whole other plan that needs to be set up to collect those measures. So now that you know that your research impact goal is realistic, able to be measured, and you know when to measure, you're ready to then start your research impact journey. At ISCRR, we categorize research impact on 3 broad categories, which I'll go through now. We talk about impacts that are regarding dissemination and diffusion. You'll see in some other research impact models, these are more categorized what people thought the short-term outcomes, the more immediate impacts that will occur as a consequence of your research impact activities. So you're tracking where learning's expected to be used next. You identify the communication channels in which your research is being used, and also the potential reach of research findings. Following on from this step are impacts and informed decision-making. Now, decision-making could be a wide variety of different levels and to different effects. These could be decision-making for your research funder. For example, ISCRR carries out a lot of research for WorkSafe Victoria, and many of our research projects directly inform their internal processes and how they run their business. And if they use our research findings, and when they use our research findings, rather, it may inform decision-making on how they can better improve internal processes within the organization. Decision-making could also be targeted at a government level. So it could be that a minister makes a decision based on the research evidence they've presented. Or the decision-making could be for target populations. So there could be key groups who need to enact some change. It could be to the end beneficiary from the researcher. It may end up that person changes their behavior and how they see workplace safety, for instance. That person may quit smoking. There's a lot of different areas that can fall under this category of informing decision-making. And then ultimately, it's a contribution that these research findings have had to societal change. I'm making a clear note that we're talking about contribution, as a single research project inevitably never saves the world, but it plays a part in the bigger research problem. So it's defining what role that research had to contribute to societal change. Societal change is a very broad category, and it will change depending on the research that you're involved with. Much of the research here at ISCRR, we look at workplace health and safety. So we could be looking at a reduction or prevention of injury or illness. There could be cost savings for our funding partner. Another example to WorkSafe Victoria, it could reduce claim costs, it could streamline processes, and therefore there could be a financial savings, which it could be the ultimate goal of that research that was carried out. We could see an overall improvement in population health as a consequence. And these are moving towards what we typically call those blue skies, longer term outcomes, watching those apples come from that tree years down the track at times. So in order for ISCRR to implement this type of research impact assessment and collation and measurement, we align it against our research impact framework. Now, this may look quite a lot to take in at a moment, so I'll go through each part individually, but our process is quite straightforward and simple. So to begin with, we see that the research project itself is the most critical and important part of the research impact journey and how we design research translation activities to help achieve these goals. And I'll go into the stages of the project lifecycle in a moment. As a consequence of the project and post-project, we'll then be defining what the intended impacts are, working out what the best method and timing is for measurement, and most importantly, I feel, the key stakeholders for future data collection. It was a learning that I'll come to in a moment from our own work, is that if you have a champion in place that you're contacting for critical research impact information and they leave an organization, they may retire, there may be a shifting of the guard or a changing in priorities, you may not be able to access that information or the quality of information that you originally had foreseen. So what we'll do is this continual cycle, a process of stakeholder engagement and looking for these intended impacts and following up at the most appropriate time. Also acknowledging that these three broad categories are not siloed and they're definitely not in isolation. From research dissemination diffusion activities, that can lead to informing decision-making, which in turn can lead to societal change. And underpinning it all is evidence to build evidence and research capacity. So as I mentioned initially in this session, communication is paramount when it comes to research translation. And to demonstrate this effective research translation, I'll go through the aforementioned parts of our project lifecycle at ISCRR. When you design a research project, already before you even start putting in for a funding application, you determine what your intended research impacts are. What do you set out to achieve? This will involve effective communication with the research users to find out what they wish to do. Most of the time, this is clearly articulated in the research aims for a project, but sometimes you may need to dig a bit deeper or to be able to categorize, to move away from long-term impacts and find what the more feasible shorter-term impacts that will lead there. When you're carrying out the research project, you'll be tracking research user needs. You'll be looking at what information you need to be collecting to fulfill those research aims. It's also good research practice to show that you'll have effective time management and the project's keeping to scope. But then also there may be opportunity, particularly a lot of research that ISCRR does, to delve into more information if something new or novel has been discovered. And that way we can maximize the value, the research that we deliver to our partners. When we have our research findings, we talk about the results in an open conversation with the research users and learn from them how they're intending to use the findings. That even though they had in place their intended research impacts, what they set out to achieve, depending on what the results are, that could greatly influence which pathway they take. For instance, if we carry out research on advising a certain treatment for a condition, it may go two ways in this instance, that our funding partners may wish to support that treatment option, Or they may see that, oh, perhaps we won't be supporting that option. Both of them equally important when it comes to research impact. And once we've completed the project, we again confirm our intended impacts to see whether things are on track, whether we have set up according to farm, we've got the feasible impact goals. We know that they're accessible, and we know when we're going to be measuring them and how. And that will then confirm what type of translation outputs we may need to develop post-project to help bridge that gap and to help to, where we can, these research impact goals to be realized. And then it goes without saying, we need to track these intended impacts. And there's always a continual learning process in our work. And we look at both success and failure to look at where we can improve for the next project. So now we've completed our research project. We've got our research findings. How do we get from these research findings to impact itself? In the previous slide, I mentioned research users quite a bit, and it's imperative to be able to define who are the research users. Ask yourself the question, who needs to see and learn from research that you carry out? Who are making those key decisions? And ultimately, who will benefit from the intended impacts? This may all be the same group of people, the same target audience, the same population, or they may be very different. Also, different impacts may have different research users. So think about what is the best way to communicate your research findings to these users? And also, what information will they need for these key decisions to be made? And the most simple way to do this is to ask them. So let's get you back into the chat again and think about a target audience of doctors. And let's assume you're all expert researchers so close to your Nobel Prize, and you've just carried out research to inform treatment for a disease. How you communicate your findings to this key audience of doctors who will be administering this treatment. Again, there's no wrong answers here. First thing that comes to mind. So we've got some suggestions. Yes, most definitely. The highest impact journal you can find will be great. Glad to see there's academics viewing today. Professional magazines. Yeah, at an association or conference, through a professional organization such as AMA, and also like carrying out things such as case studies. And I'm glad that someone says multi-mode. So here are just a few of different examples of how to communicate research findings. And some of these we've already talked about: academic outputs, media attention, further research, perhaps a research summary to a peak body or organization. You may wish to contribute towards a ministerial brief, or you may even find that you develop a fact sheet for patients to help doctors in their work. Simply put, you need to understand your research audience and ask what the best method of communication is, how they'll best utilize those research findings. And you'll find that that will help guide that road to impact so much better. So how has ISCRR done in our research impact journey taking this approach? So 2 years ago, which seems a lifetime ago now, thanks to COVID, we carried out a pilot research impact study on 17 projects. And we assessed the impact at a very short time period afterwards, about 6 to 12 months post-project. We're surprised to learn that of these 17 projects, we identified 71 different impacts that were intended to be achieved across those three broad categories of research, diffusion, dissemination, decision-making, and contributing towards societal change. While you may look at that 65% as a quite low amount, we're quite surprised that over half of the intended impacts were achieved 6 to 12 months project completion. Reason why we're pleasantly surprised by this data is that we found, which is of no surprise, that nearly all of the research diffusion dissemination impacts were achieved. Nearly 3/4 of those influenced decision-making were achieved, but then over a third had already contributed towards societal change, that there was demonstration for some of our projects that there were less people being injured. There was benefits that were happening to the target population that were measurable and measured, and we had data to inform this result. And also quite pleasing, we found that during this time frame, over 80% of our projects helped WorkSafe Victoria, that's where we focus this research impact pilot on, make evidence-informed decisions. And that's a mantra that we're carrying forward to ensure that all our projects hit that goal. And ideally, we'd like this to be 100%, but you'll never find 100% with research impact goals, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. What we found that guided success in terms of research impact were the projects that we had strong stakeholder engagement from the project design phase. And there's a reason why I articulated each step of our project lifecycle to show that that communication was paramount for us being able to achieve research impact success, to deliver what we needed to deliver to the right people in the right format, but then to receive the measures of impact. Also, it was important for us to ensure that our research impact goals were in alignment with business needs to ensure that those measurements were going to be taken place. And it goes without saying, and I'll be saying this numerous times for the rest of this presentation in the next 5 minutes, that is the identification of champions that helped research impact to be achieved. At times where we found that research impact goals weren't being met, there were a few cases where the feasibility of impact goals was in question. In short, the research was being too ambitious. There were effects that weren't going to be seen for many years' time, but there were missing impact goals that could have been measured and collated to show the success of the journeys thus far. Validation of findings was also an important factor for consideration, in that you may wish the research project to, let's say, make a workplace healthier or safer in a certain regard. But if those formal measures haven't been taken, we can't validate the findings. And at times we have anecdotal data to suggest that impact has occurred, but we can't verify if that was the case. And it goes without saying, resourcing is always a major barrier, as the more you delve into these areas, the more resource and cost intensive the process will be. So in the last few minutes of my talk, I'm going to give you just a bit of a preview on one of the case studies we're currently developing. And this will be a high-level overview of a process that we're doing now to look more deeply into projects to learn more about these success factors and potential barriers. So looking at the work of bitumen fume and contents, I'm sure everybody has seen roadworks being carried out. And if you've been going for a walk late at night and you've been seeing them laying down bitumen, you'll know that there's definite fumes involved. And it's well known that there's potential health detriments from inhaling the fumes and exposure to the bitumen contents. So we carried out a research project which involved an evidence review and environmental scan, looking at the health effects associated with exposure. In particular, looking at what adverse health effects there are and how to mitigate that risk. We found through our work doing research, a more detailed research impact assessment, that this research, thankfully, it was well received and well regarded, and we had great researchers in our team carrying out well-conducted studies. The research was widely distributed to key stakeholder groups. There was even a forum group involved to then set up action and implementation plans based on the learnings from these reports. guidance material was developed, and there was continuing discussion how we at ISCRR can assist in disseminating these research findings further to target audiences. So you can see that this bridging the gap had already started occurring very soon after the research project was completed. A grant was issued to Australian Workers Union to continue this work. And currently now there's a high level of engagement with industry to address where these issues are and focusing on worker safety, fume monitoring, and bitumen composition. It's an incredibly complex and at times difficult area to address, but there's key decisions that have been made now that's resulted in new projects in trials in development to ultimately ensure that workers who are working in this field are safer. And finally, looking at contribution to societal change, it goes without saying that this is still early days and we're not expecting to see any evidence, perhaps for several years' time. But this work is showing that it's quite promising that our research findings that we developed at ISCRR has led to improved safety, improved behaviour change in sites of concern. And we're setting up the process now to be able to obtain those measures to then show in our case study over time that our research has led to and contributed to these longer term impacts, and importantly, how it has done so and what learnings we can have from that process. So our key factors for research impact success from this journey, again, researcher engagement throughout the project lifecycle, champions driving the agenda. And what we've found with all our research is that high level of communication and engagement and having champions in place in pivotal points, in decision-making points, helps drive research agenda. And I think everyone can think about examples from their own research of what they may have seen on the news where that's certainly the case. There was resource commitment as well to address the research problem. And now there's continued engagement with industry leaders, those who are exhibiting best practice to be serving as champions, and also then proactive engagement in areas of potential concern to help mitigate future risk. So I hope today that you have learned a bit more about research translation, research impact, and in particular ISCRR's approach to research impact, the key features of a research impact goal being feasible, accessible, and hopefully ready to measure or plans to measure, and to look at research impact success factors, and particularly the importance of effective communication and identifying and nurturing champions in the research impact journey. In the chat, these links will be shared. If you want to learn more about research impact, the Institute for Work and Health Canada, they're pioneers of this area. And it was on the basis of their impact framework where we have developed ours. CSIRO and Telethon Kids Institute both have differing but similar approaches to research impact, and their case studies are a pleasure to read. And also, if you want to know about our current research that I mentioned on bitumen fumes, both of those research reports are available on our clearinghouse. So thank you for your time. Please stay for the Q&A session. And once you leave the session today, there will be a survey that will appear in your browser, and the feedback helps us improve these learning series sessions that we're giving to you.
Great, thanks, Jimmy. So we do have time for questions, and I've got a really nice easy one for you that's come through, is just if there's a published copy of the research impact framework that can be accessed. I know the slides will be circulated, but do we have anything else that we can share with participants?
Certainly, we've presented our research impact framework at several conferences, and we are in the process of developing a manuscript. So it hasn't yet gone to a peer-reviewed journal, but we're hoping that will happen later this year. But if you want any updates on our research impact journey, and also to read the blogs that we have on our website, go to isccr.com.au and join our mailing list, and you'll hear about any publications that we produce in the space.
Right, thank you. Now, another question that's come through is what is the best time frame after a research project to assess for impact?
Yeah, that will vary quite a lot, and it's a great question. For our ISCRR research, when we carried out that pilot, there were many projects that 6 to 12 months was too early. But what's important though is that you set up that communication with the research users during the project to figure out when is the best time to touch base again. And there may not be an answer. So 3 to 6 months may be a great time to touch base, ask how things are progressing, find out if priorities have changed, how those measures are going to be collected, and then to follow over time. But in short, every impact goal will have a different length of time, and you have to acknowledge that many times we'll not know that answer straight off.
Okay, thank you. And I know in some of our research and our impact work, we've found that obviously not every project achieves the impact that you would hope. So another question that's come through is relating a bit about to the lower success stories. So we want to share where there's been great impact, but how do we go about reporting on those that maybe didn't have the impact that was intended?
Certainly, that's very, very critical to the research impact journey, is to, in a way, celebrate failure as much as success. A lot of times that we found for our research impact assessment that it wasn't always the case that we failed in the research impact journey, that the impacts weren't realized. It was that we weren't able to collect those measures. Some key person during the process may have moved on to another organization. The organization we worked with may have changed priorities, and those measures aren't being collected that we thought will be collected to demonstrate research impact success. And that's incredibly important to show that proactive engagement from the beginning of the project, and to have plans from the outset to collect research impact measures, why that's so critical.
Right, okay. And just another question that's come through relates to translation. What are some of the communication methods or channels that you have found to be most successful when translating complex findings?
Another great question. That will really depend on the research impact goal in mind. Recently at ISCRR, we try to be innovative where we can. We like to explore new options. It ultimately comes down to that communication with the research user to find out what the best channel is. We're developing several fact sheets at the moment to help doctors with regards to working with patients with workplace injuries, to help inform what the evidence is surrounding their decision making. Other times, we'll be contributing more plain language summaries to then be used by executives in development of ministerial briefs. It really depends upon, again, the research impact goal, but to be flexible in our approach and to try and explore new avenues, and again, collect the measures on how they've been received and how well they work to inform future translation activities.
Right. And I might just add a couple of other things to that for Dana's benefit, who's asked the question, is I know recently Jimmy's been doing some work with his team around infographics and more visuals rather than text. So every project, we have a presentation called an emerging findings presentation, which starts to share what's emerging in the research rather than it being at the very end, after the final report. And those presentations have changed in content quite a bit over the past probably 18 months or so, where much of it is far more visual than text. And we're also moving to using more infographics to explain complex findings. But often it is, as Jimmy said, a dialogue with the end users and really understanding, what's their level of ability to understand information and who are they then taking the findings away from and using with. Are they taking it to injured workers? Are they taking it to people that speak English as a second language? And in a way, brainstorming with them how we can go about disseminating a way that things will be taken up. But I would certainly say visual approaches And we're also embarking on using short videos at the moment where suitable to help deliver short, sharp messages with text visuals on the screen as well. So that's a couple of examples. But we're always looking for new ways, I will say. So would love to hear how other people are doing it as well.
And also keep in mind, if you are a researcher, you may not have that capacity to embark on all these communication activities, but there is opportunities then to partner with other organizations. Of course, we'll spruik to partner with us at ISCRR, but also there are many different ways, and it's good to be able to map out what the translation plan will be. And it may not be that you as a researcher have to carry out all these plans, but if you can help that data get to the right people for them to develop those translation products, you'll then be in turn helping that research impact journey.
Thank you. And we've got time for one more question that's come through, which is, when does ISCRR stop tracking impact or assessing for impact for a project?
I'd like to answer this question with never, but realistically, research impact monitoring does take resources, and we have to be realistic in what our end goals are. Going back to the analogy of planting a seed, if the ultimate goal is to create apples and we have achieved that goal, then we will consider that research impact journey as complete. We won't be closing the door completely. What we endeavour to do at ISCRR is to always keep open dialogue and communication with all our stakeholders. And if we do hear that new avenues, new tangents of work, then we'll critically assess what value it is to follow that detective pathline, to find out that new bits of data, to find out that new evidence, to see where the impact journey has moved to.
Great, thanks, Jimmy. All right, well, we're on time now, so we might finish up. A big thank you to Jimmy for sharing his thoughts and our framework around research impact and our experiences. I hope to everybody that's attended that you've enjoyed the discussion and have learned something from it.